Suzanne Wright. I'm here in place of Amy
Hold on,
tonight.
Suzanne. Hold on, Suzanne, we're not live yet.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, we're live. If you want to go to gallery view as well.
Joe, there's just so many things I have to think about.
And then you're ready
Thank
to
you.
go.
Thank you. All right, so good evening, everyone. Today is March 24th. I'm going to call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. Amy is unavailable tonight, so I'm taking over. It's a virtual meeting and it is being recorded. We're meeting in accordance with the executive order issued by Governor Baker on March 12th, 2020. Order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 304, Section 20. So, hi, anyone have some community announcements? We'll start with Myra.
Sorry. Hi, I just wanted to talk about how a lot more seniors are starting to hear back from their colleges and they're committing to everything. And it's really exciting to see everyone that you've been going to school with since like first grade committing to their dream colleges. And even though we've been through so much with COVID and everything, physically and mentally, people are still excelling greatly and going to Ivy Leagues and everything. And I just couldn't be more proud of my grade.
That's about, can we ask you, Myra, have you heard or have you committed anywhere yet?
Yeah, I committed to Regis for pre-med.
Awesome, yay.
Amazing, amazing.
That's amazing, congratulations. Oh, that's gonna be
Thank
so
you.
great. Super. I don't see Tabitha here tonight, so.
Tabitha's coming late. She sent an email. She's gonna jump on as soon as she gets out of work.
All right, super. Karen, anything to add?
I don't have anything tonight, but congrats, Myra.
Yeah, congratulations. John?
Yeah, I just one quick thing, but also congrats to Myra. And I guess I hadn't thought of this, but is there maybe at the next meeting or at some point this spring, maybe get a presentation on just where kids have landed, just so the community has just a better sense of that. I thought, something like that might be, the end goal for the parents is like, hey, let's get our kids to a good school. And I think hearing it and reinforcing it just would be great.
I think in the past couple of years, Emily Barnum has presented that information. It's
Okay.
really, she's kept a running list and we have presented that to school committee because certainly we've talked about celebrating the achievements of our students.
Absolutely.
So
that's good to hear. Thank you,
Yeah.
Mrs. Minchalakis. And just, Suzanne, just one other quick thing. I just wanted to, just with everything that's happened this past week with the COVID spike, I just wanted to commend the nursing team, the superintendent's leadership team, Board of Health and others, just for all, from what I'm hearing, they were doing just incredible amounts of work. So I just wanted to recognize that.
Yeah, I echo what you're saying because there's been so many emails and I've seen so much communication. It's been awesome. I wanted to just give a shout out to Miss Mackie Knowles. She arranged a meeting yesterday with technology directors across Massachusetts who have built new schools or are in the process of building new schools, specifically schools that specifically she was asking them to teach us some lessons learned from their technology purchases and what they're using and what's worked and what hasn't worked and things we should consider. And they were so impressed. I mean, it was a really professional group of people and they were really just like giving her a lot of kudos for doing this so early in our process. And there were so many lessons learned. It makes me feel so good about her and our technology team. I mean, 3 people from the technology team were at this meeting along with her, right? Listening to the stuff that's going to be great in the new school. And it just made me think like we are really doing our due diligence with this project, and for her to reach out and do that on our own. It was really just like, I really appreciated it. It was really impressive to listen to these other technology directors all share information and really like in really unselfish ways to try to make our school even better than the technology they have in their schools, which was really cool. So I just really appreciate that she did that and took the initiative to do that. So that was great. And I just wanted to make sure we just recognize that she's really working hard. And they were telling her it's going to be a full-time job soon, so she might have to do it full-time. Anyway, so that's great. So we'll move on from from community announcements to the superintendent's report.
Sure enough, I will share my screen.
Thanks.
Should I enlarge it?
It seems okay to me, but
Okay. Let's do this. Okay. So I'm trying to remember the positives and all that's happening and really give some shout outs to the last couple of meetings. And the first shout out is really recognizing on top of our nursing staff. Thank you for that, Mr. Jantis. A huge shout out to the unsung heroes of our custodians and our facilities staff and our facilities department, who really over the last year has worked tirelessly, done, turned on a dime to do what we've asked them to do. And now, as we don't even have enough desks in the districts and desks are being delivered because we've had tables, or putting them together, putting the tape down in the classrooms, rearranging the classrooms. And so I just wanted to shout out to those team members because we really couldn't do our work without them. And then I also want to thank the volunteers. We started to utilize the list we compiled. Our elementary schools, if you all remember, have given out boxes of materials. And in order to organize them and collect them, or collect them and organize them, Dr. Bacon has tapped into that volunteer list that was compiled, and we have volunteers coming in to help the staff organize those materials as the kids transition back to in-person. So a huge thank you. And yes, custodians have been working on the weekends. Our nursing staff was working over the weekend, and really the commitment to our district from every level is really impressive, and one of the things that makes our district very special. I wanted to update the committee on the ventilation report and those purple rooms. At the meeting on March 10th, we talked about the fact that we had, they were coming in to balance and test those rooms again. Of the 12 purple rooms that were tested at the elementary and middle and high school, 7 of them have come back online with the mitigation that had occurred and are no longer purple. So that would be 2 at Clark, 3 at Stanley, and 2 at the middle school. The other 5 rooms have shown improvement but remain purple, which translates to the fact that they can be used, but they have to be used with a 6-foot distancing in those spaces and less capacity. Those are 2 rooms at Hadley and 3 at the middle school. Again, they can be used, but even with the mitigation, they remain in purple. So that's pretty fantastic that 7 of them came online, because that gave our principals the ability to start moving things around and planning for lunches. That ties right into the Stanley School project update, the ventilation project over there of those 8 classrooms in the old building. We have a commitment that that project will be done this Friday, March 26th. Mrs. Huntley, Mr. Casper, Mr. Baker, myself, we're talking about a drafted transition plan that Mrs. Huntley has already developed for when our little Stanley students will be returning to Stanley School. She'll be sharing that with faculty and staff and families in the coming days. But what I do want to emphasize is there'll be no transition before next week, so people shouldn't panic. There'll be plenty of notice. But I think she has a very sensible drafted plan where we'll still hit our target of the last week of March, first couple of days of April. So it's great news. And again, shout out to the facilities department for overseeing and keeping everybody on track over there. Between Ms. Seibert, Mr. Casper, Mr. Baker, they really have held these this vendor to their timeline and commitment so that we can get our kids back to Stanley School. Moving into our next phase of learning, I thought it would be interesting to share this data with you that Dr. Bacon compiled in terms of what were the survey results. Please keep in mind that these survey results were as of Monday. And so the percentage of Clark families who chose in person were 93%, Hadley 89%, Stanley 95%, middle 88%, and high school 85%. Those are pretty great numbers. If you move to the far right in the last column, approximate unknowns, I do anticipate those have been reduced because I know that our teams and our schools have been reaching out to those families and finding out which way they're landing. So again, this was Monday. I haven't refreshed it as of today, but that's a pretty significant percentage of in-person, and we're really excited to get everybody back. Except for the high school and the high school setback, we are moving ahead with the schedule that we outlined at the March 10th meeting. That means that on March 29th, preschool is coming in for 5 days, 8:30 to 2, and we're bringing in more students. We're sticking with the K1 coming in beginning next week for half days, 5 days a week. Some questions arose from some families about, given the outbreak at the high school, did we think we needed to delay that time? And we spent a lot of time as a leadership team talking about that. And I would first say that they're contact tracing, they've been contact tracing on those related to those cases for quite some time now. Families have been contacted if they were close contacts. There's a protocol to follow if you have siblings, so those kids shouldn't be in. So we feel like health and safety wise, we have a good handle on that. More importantly for us is that we have kindergarten and first graders who've lost out on a lot of in-person learning and being in the building. And in particular, we have kindergarten students who chose to go remote and might not have even been in the building at all in hybrid. And we really think it's important to take care of our littlest learners by getting them in on their own before the 2nd through 4th graders come in. So we are sticking with that timeline on the 29th. They will be in half days, no lunches will be served yet, and the teachers will be available for Zoom in the afternoon at 1:15. Our middle school, again, is going to do 5 days, 8:30 to 12:30, again, half days, not implementing lunch just yet. And then on April 5th, kindergarten to 4th grade will be 5 full days with lunch. Our high school will be all 5 days, full days, and they have their lunch worked out. And then on April 12th, the middle school will be coming in 5 full days with lunch. I do want to emphasize lunch has been a challenge to figure out, but certainly knowing that Little Stanley will be moving back to Big Stanley, the purple room availability and what that has allowed principals to do in terms of shifting spaces and freeing up some spaces, the fact that the tents are going up, the fact that the good weather is mostly coming, that we have seats that can be used, and we have a comprehensive volunteer list to get bodies in there. A shout out to the principals for the work that they've done with their staff to figure out these lunches. And another shout out to the teachers union, who has been incredibly collaborative with us in terms of expanding their contractual hours for, say, lunches. I'm really proud of the relationship we have and the fact that we have, everybody's been so reasonable. They know the goal is to get the kids back in. They know that we have to have lunches. And I guess I would say flexibility and understanding has really, we've been meeting quite often, but I'm really proud of the ease with which we've been moving towards this transition. You know, certainly we all want to be safe. We all want to be healthy. The fact that staff faculty and staff are inputting their vaccination information in a Google sheet that we're able to see when teachers on medical accommodations are fully vaccinated and can return. I talked about the rolling return. I'm really very hopeful for the end of this school year. It's there's a lot going on, but everyone from custodians to administrative assistants to the teachers union is working incredibly collaboratively to move towards the end goal. We all have the same goal. One thing I'd like to say, and a lot of this I am going to put in my weekly communication to families this week. I'm going to be very honest here and direct. During the hybrid model, we had families commit to hybrid in person into days where their students would be in person. But we found that if it wasn't convenient for the family and they had an opportunity to go away for a long weekend because everyone is stressed, they did that and they would hop onto a Zoom. That presented a lot of challenges for our teachers. That is no longer going to be allowed. If you are one of the people that have committed to in-person learning, then if you are absent, and you will not be allowed to pop onto a Zoom that is whether live streaming or remote learners. There is a commitment now to be in person, and we're going back to pre-pandemic days with attendance policies. So if you're supposed to be in person and you're not in school, you will be marked absent. Suzanne?
So if, for example, you're a sibling of a kid that's positive right now, are you going to be given the option to have that remote learning for that time? Like if you
that will be a communication between the family and the principal, and I'm sure those accommodations will be made. It's more about, as it's COVID related, accommodations will be made.
right?
It's more about the families that get called and say, well, I just decided to keep my child home today. That is not going to be an option. Unrelated to COVID, they won't have access to those Zooms and the Zoom links. And finally, I had shared with some committee members that I received a couple of parent emails regarding football and their request for a meeting with me and to be allowed to play football sooner than the April 5th that we put on all athletics because of this outbreak at the high school. I wanted to provide some clarification to what was said in those emails. First of all, we follow the state guidelines and not the Center for Disease Control or CDC. So DPH and CTC, which is the Community Tracing Collaborative, allows individuals to test out of quarantine at day 5 or day 7. However, individuals need to continue to monitor for symptoms for a full 14 days. Now, for those in the audience that might not know, the district, in collaboration with our Department of Public Health, who worked tirelessly to get a community mobile unit, testing unit, to the high school on Monday afternoon, and we provided testing for juniors, seniors, staff, and the athletes. We had 121 people tested, and as of yesterday, we still don't have those test results back. And the other point on this one is that individuals can become positive or symptomatic anytime up to 14 days. The other point I'd like to make is I didn't make this decision sitting in my office in isolation. There have been so many meetings with the Department of Public Health, the emergency management team lead, Mr. Chief Archer, and this was a decision that was made in consultation with them and actually following their recommendation. So we're not treating one team any differently than we're treating all of the athletic teams that were hit by this in some way. The other piece to remember is that football is considered a high-risk sport. In the close contacts, no matter how many positive cases there are on the team, need to be closely monitored and continue to monitor their health through the 14-day window because they could turn positive. Part of what we were also trying to find out is what are those test results? Are they turning positive? Has it stopped the spread? Those are things that the nursing staff is working closely with the Department of Public Health to get that information for us. I do know that the number of positive cases has increased since last Friday. Today I got an update and there were, I would say, 5 or 6 more positive cases. So we are seeing that individuals are becoming positive that weren't initially positive. I just want to highlight that I understand, and I've said repeatedly, given whatever issue it is here, I had a senior in high school myself last year. I know the loss these kids are feeling. We have allowed them to play, but this was not a punitive decision. You know, we have to consider the health and safety of our students, our families, our teams, and our whole community. We based our decision on the recommendations in collaboration with the health department and to really mitigate, you know, risk. I understand these kids, their passion for playing and this being their senior year. And as we look ahead, I am in meetings with Mr. Kohut in terms of senior activities at the end of the year. We have had several meetings already about graduation. So I would like people to keep in mind that this senior class is probably going to experience a more normal end of the year than last year's senior class. And there is loss everywhere. And I understand what this means to students, but we are making decisions that are best for everybody. And they're not easy decisions, and they're not decisions that are made lightly, but they're important decisions to keep everyone safe. And that concludes my report.
Does anyone have any comments or questions for the superintendent? John, go ahead.
Thank you for that, Superintendent. I guess just a point of clarification on one of the bullet points you had up, and it was about the as of March 23rd, not having test results for more than half the football team. So I guess just to clarify, that doesn't mean that half the team hasn't tested. They've tested, you just haven't got the results yet, right?
Yes, you know, the largest group to go through the mobile testing site on Monday were the athletes. You know, we certainly weren't taking names of who was there. And I really expected higher numbers, but I can only guess that a lot of the athletes may have been tested elsewhere. So it doesn't mean they haven't been tested. It means that we haven't received results yet, at least from our 121 that were tested. So yes, to clarify that doesn't mean they weren't tested.
Okay, and just I think what I'm hearing also is, this is a hypothetical, but even if the entire football team tested negative, just given this 14-day window you referenced, those negative tests wouldn't change the April 5th date, correct?
Not for the Department of Public Health and the school department, no. Given the high risk nature of football and also the amount of close contacts that could turn positive in the next, you know, during the 14-day period.
Okay, and I just wanted to add, you know, I know you folks had the mobile testing facility. There's that Project Beacon site on the Linway, which is right near the clock tower. Very convenient. You know, folks weren't aware of that. It's drive through. You don't even get out of your car. It's very convenient.
Yes.
Just wanted to mention that.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else, we'll just keep going through the agenda. So Mrs. Seibert, you are up next with an update on the cost centers. And
Yeah, could you enable me to share my screen?
oh
please?
yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
I'm making you a co-host.
All right. Okay, can everyone see that okay? Great. So thank you for this opportunity to provide you with an update on our FY21 budget. Here's the FY21 budget by cost center. I wanted to remind the school committee that there was a budget transfer that did occur back with the special town meeting in November. They added an additional $30,000 to our budget. Overall, the school department is tracking towards its total appropriation, and we do anticipate spending our entire appropriation by June 30th. We are experiencing budgetary demands that do require us to be prudent as we approach the end of the fiscal year. We continue to monitor the use of state and federal funds and the changing landscape. And by that, I mean, in the last month or so, we've received different guidance from DESE on what is FEMA eligible for reimbursement. And I've been explaining to the superintendent and to the leadership team today, this is kind of a game changer for us, because a lot of the work that we did on our infrastructure, on our facilities for testing and balancing and that ventilation improvement remediation that we did, which was close to about $400,000 that we used CARES funds for, could potentially be reimbursed from FEMA. And if that happens, that means we now have that $400,000 to spend on something else. And Amy Sorrow, the town accountant, Ron Mendez, and I, we meet weekly, and we're really committed and working very closely on all of this. Another good example was the COVID testing. FEMA would reimburse for testing for town residents only. So we took the approach that we teased out our faculty and school department and employees that live in town. So we let the town pay for that so they could put for reimbursement. But now FEMA is kind of giving us indications that they may reimburse school as well. So as this landscape changes, so would our budget. So right now I'm carrying some of those costs in our budget because there wasn't a grant to park it on, but there may be some place to move some of these things to. So I wanted to preface that it's still a changing landscape when it comes to the FY21 budget. This is probably very small, and I'm going to go through it by cost center, but I wanted to give everyone a big view of it. The data for this was pulled on March 20th. I do want to preface that, of the $10 million that I'm forecasting to spend between now and June 30th, 9.6 million of that is payroll. So 93% of this projection is payroll related. I think that's important to note because sometimes people think of budgets as 1/12, 1/12, 1/12. And school department budgets do not operate like that. The majority of our money gets spent in that 182-day window for students. And the biggest window right now is marching towards the end of the school year. I do plan to update the committee monthly now because we are getting into the end of the year, and I want to keep you apprised of any changes. So the next update would be April 28th. So to go through kind of cost center by cost center, the administrative cost center is on track to come in at budget. There were some salary savings as a result of clerical staff. We had a couple of open positions that, as a result of the pandemic, we kept open a little bit longer. So there was some open positions, some vacancy savings, and we did restructure a couple positions. Rather than making them full-time, we made them 30-hour a week instead of 40-hour week positions. So that resulted in some savings. Our legal services were budgeted at $50,000. Right now they're coming in about $12,000 under budget, which is good. At the time we budgeted the audit fee at $7,000. We were with a different auditor. We changed auditors this year, and our fee came in at $5,000. So that represents that $14,000 savings on the contracted services line. Supplies, there's no other way to explain the supply line other than our consumption of supplies is down significantly right now. And then our other expenses line, this is where overall we are under budget on our other expenses by about $26,000. This is where we budget for conferences and PD, and so attendance of those type of things is down. It's being offset right now because I'm carrying a line item to reimburse the food service program, $85,000. That's the estimate right now. And that estimate was developed when we had no end goal on when kids were coming in. So I think once kids come back in full time and we're serving lunches, I do expect that $85,000 to go down. I'll take this opportunity. Hopefully people are watching at home. Lunch is free for everyone. Please take lunch. It will help our food service program, and they're good, well-balanced and nutritious meals. And I know our food service would appreciate serving your children lunches, and you can buy an adult meal as well. So right now I'm carrying $85,000 for food services, but I don't anticipate it being that high. I do hope that that number is going to come down. The other number that I'm carrying, and again, this was in consultation with the town accountant, a lot of the CARES money was for things that were unbudgeted. And as I explained to the school committee when I developed the budget, you know, I used the unemployment line. I always knew there was a little bit of wiggle room in that line. That was kind of where I had my contingency built in. Unemployment related to the pandemic, I have to use that $100,000 first before I could start using CARES money. So I'm carrying that $100,000 right now. We're hopeful that it won't come in that high. I'll be very honest with this group. We have not seen a bill for unemployment since February of 2020. When the claims started spiking in March and the subsequent fraud started occurring, unemployment is very far behind. And it's a little bit different for municipalities because we're self-funded. So any claim that comes in, we pay a certain percentage of it, whereas businesses fund unemployment through their payroll and their taxes. So it's a different game for communities. So municipalities across the state are in the same boat we're in. Mr. Mendez is working closely to try and get this resolved. I see a hand up. So Mrs. Wright?
I'm just curious, can't you kind of predict this, knowing like who has been laid off or who's not working in our district? Like,
so some of it is, but the last claim statement I even received was only through September of 2020. We're not even getting the statements. So the communication from unemployment is very slow right now.
but I'm saying, like, irregardless of that communication, don't we know who we have to pay just by knowing?
I don't know if they'll
who's
file or not. They may not file. They may get another job and they may not file.
Oh, I see. But it's not going to be worse than what we know. It could be
No,
better.
it shouldn't be. We really it shouldn't be to the tune of $100,000. So let me put that out there, because we have really the only people we let go as a result of the pandemic was some of our extended day staff. Otherwise, we didn't sunset anybody. We paid people in full all of last year, and we haven't let anyone go this year. So I don't anticipate it being that high. Mrs. Marshall, did you have a question as well, or?
Well, I did, but then I put my hand down. But does it matter? I mean, we get billed for Massachusetts unemployment payments, but I feel like a lot of people have been getting the pandemic unemployment. Are we on the hook for that, or is that just paid for with the stimulus, money?
That comes directly. We don't. So I think you're asking about the extra $600, and then now the extra $300 in unemployment.
Right. Right.
Yeah. We're not obligated for that additional.
Okay.
That's funded through the federal government.
Okay. That's what I thought.
So moving on to General Education Cost Center. This one is well under budget at almost $300,000, but there are a lot of moving pieces and parts in here. So the professional salaries line is one I'll talk a bit about. So we have taken measures to increase a few FTEs at the high school to cover additional sections. We increased a few people from 0.8 to 1.0 for the rest of the year at the elementary level to try and help cover leaves and lunches and other needs. And then I want to be mindful that we've also had to cover for 9 leave of absences over the course of the year. So there's been significant costs incurred. There was a lot of savings from turnover in positions. People leave for whatever reason, whether it's a retirement or a move or a family decision. So there was a lot of turnover and savings from turnovers, but a lot of that got offset by other incremental expenses. The other salary lines, there were a number of vacant positions. We've had people who started the year on leaves, or there was one individual who was transferred to a grant that was almost a $40,000 savings for that person alone. And then substitute savings. And I've got another slide about substitutes later on in my presentation. But we have had significant savings on the substitute line. And then again, talking about supplies and materials and other expenses, these have been largely unused as a result of the remote and hybrid schedule. We used grant funds to purchase those materials that were in the bins that the superintendent spoke about at the beginning of the year. We used grant monies to buy the bins and buy the materials that went in the bins. And so that's really largely driving those savings in those lines right now. Moving on to special education. Again, there's some savings on the professional salary line that were offset, and I'll talk more about some of the larger hits that our budget has taken this year. But one of the offsets, we had budgeted for $200,000 in special education tuition, and the placement of one student changed, and so we're only going to have about $150,000 of revenue to offset our program costs. We did hire 2 FTEs, one to cover a leave and another to help with an additional program at one of the elementary schools. And in the special education world, we've had to cover for 6 leave of absences over the course of the year. So between the 9 on and this is just teacher absences. This isn't covering tutors and ESP absences. This is just teacher absences. We've had to cover over 15 over the course of the year. The other salary lines is a savings as a result of open positions and unpaid leaves. And then finally, the contracted services line is over budget by about $367,000. And that's really a result of increased tuition expense and contracted services. Transportation savings, there is transportation savings where some of our out of district students are remote and therefore we're not transporting them. We're also not paying fully for days that the buses aren't being utilized. The same as we did back in the spring. We negotiated with NRT to pay a proportion of the contracted days. School facilities. You can see the other salary lines. That's where we capture our expenses for our custodial staff. That's tracking over budget right now, about $27,000. That's associated with the overtime related to the custodians' work on Saturdays. Contracted services. That budget line had to absorb some of the costs associated with the Stanley expense project. Our other expenses line, we lost the offset, and this is where I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the offsets that we use. And I know the committee is well aware that we have extended the extended day program and the rental income that we generate from our buildings combined for an offset of $145,000 that's used to reduce our electric and natural gas expenses. So our electric expenses right now are tracking to budget, but our natural gas is tracking about $84,000 over budget. And I haven't had an opportunity to meet with Mr. Casper about this, but my assumption is that the windows being open has driven some of the natural gas consumption up. So we'll have to meet about that, but we expected that to happen. This budget development forecast also assumes that we're going to move about $80,000 of COVID expense off of our operating budget onto a grant, and whether it goes onto our ESSER 2 grant or the funding that that the superintendent heard earlier. She's getting better intel than I am, that ESSER 3 may be coming sooner than I thought. Remains to be seen, but we will hopefully, some of the clarity, and this is what I led with, some of the clarity with FEMA reimbursing us will lead to some of the decisions that we make with this. Desi provided a great slide at one of the presentations that I attended, and it literally listed all of the different grants that we have right now, and it had end dates for all of them, and it said you should be spending them down in this order, you know. So and that's what we're trying to do. So so we will continue to monitor and use our grants as best we can to help offset some of these COVID-related expenses. And then district-wide programming is a combination of health services, technology, and student activities and athletics. And right now it's tracking towards budget. The significant savings in this cost center is the other salary line, and that's really crossing guard driven. Right now they're only working 4 days a week and not 5 days a week. That will change for the balance of the year, and I did forecast them to work all 68 days remaining. But that's really the driving force behind their march towards $35,000 being under budget. So I wanted to get in a little bit of the weeds to help put some of this in context for the committee and for the public as well, because I know, again, I'll mention it. So a lot of people think of budgeting 1/12, 1/12, 1/12. This data was pulled on March 20th. We still have 68 contracted days. So 37% of our school year is still to happen. That's significant. That's almost a 60-40 split. We still have almost 40% of the year left when I'm developing this budget, this forecast. So a lot can happen with that large remaining time. I wanted to say, and I pointed this out to the superintendent, our teachers, which is our largest expense, elect either 21 or 26 pays. So depending upon what you elected, you either have 7 payrolls left, which means you're done in June, or you have 12 left when I developed this budget, means you have 5 coming over the summer. So I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that we have $9.6 million in payroll still to pay out for this year. And so I wanted to provide kind of a visual so people could see just how much is really still left in the school year. Oops, what'd I do? Going a little too fast. So next steps. We are going to follow the town's lead, and I'm not sure if the committee knows this. I know I've spoken with the superintendent about it and our leadership team. The town implemented a budget freeze back on March 15th, and we're going to do the same because there's a lot of assumptions in here that have to happen to get us to that $23,000 of savings at the end of the year, and we still have 40% of the year left. So at this time, it's prudent to say, unless it's an absolutely necessary expenditure, we have to have a budget freeze. We want to be mindful of what's going on. We are a department of the town, and it would be inappropriate for us to keep spending without being mindful that there are constraints on the town side as well. So at this point, any additional purchases would need to be approved by the superintendent and myself before we could move forward with it. And I know all of our staff know that they're not allowed to purchase anything without a purchase order, but I put that in there so the committee knows that we are practicing fidelity with that school committee policy where we do require purchase orders for purchases. I wanted to talk a bit about the significant revenue loss and demands that, we lost the extended day support, we lost the building rental income. Pre-K tuition is another offset that we use normally. And this one is a little trickier because I don't really consider that an offset. I usually charge a teacher and 2 aides directly to that revolving fund. So it's not really showing up as an offset the way the other ones traditionally do. I've had to migrate that staff onto the operating budget this year because there is no peer revenue from students attending pre-K, and the lunch bunch groups aren't really operating. So that $95,000 of tuition that we normally get for our pre-K programs has not occurred this year. I talked a little bit about the school lunch loss. I do think that that's going to come in lower than that $85,000, but we'd need a little bit of data from April to kind of get a gauge on where it might be. And then I spoke briefly about the loss of about $50,000 of special education tuition. So that was $375,000 that we had to absorb in our operating budget. I want to talk a little bit about absences. This is anecdotal data. It only includes absences that require subs. So we have a wonderful sub coordinator that staff contact to let her know that they're going to be absent. And so this is data from her data set. So it's I'll give you an example of someone who wouldn't be in this population, a guidance counselor. We wouldn't get a sub for a day for a guidance counselor. So teachers, ESPs, and tutors, year-over-year data presented from September to February. So you can see that 706 fewer days absence for teachers this year compared to last year. ESPs, 154 fewer absences, and for tutors it was 94. And this had a real impact on our substitute costs. So our daily and building-based sub budget was $383,000. Our actual projected expense for daily subs right now is about $123,000. And we've also incurred almost $93,000 for long-term subs for those LOAs that I spoke about earlier. So we've had a sub savings right now about $166,000. So that helped offset that $375,000 lost revenue. And then finally, I just wanted to talk a bit, obviously in this presentation, you could see that there were 2 cost centers that were overspent. This is where there's really a decision point for the committee. At this point, we could have a motion to approve budget transfers to bring those cost centers into balance, or given the rest of the school year, we could defer making any transfers until closer to the end of the year and do 1 transfer to bring things into balance. I'll defer to the committee. Both are appropriate, but I'll defer to the committee in any questions you have.
Is it, Mrs. Seibert, is there, Ms. Seibert, is there a do you have a preference for how that's done? Because it seems like, why wouldn't you wait if we could?
I would prefer to wait, but I also wanted to be mindful that the budget is the school committee's purview, and you may want to have it be in balance. So I put it out there.
I would prefer to wait. I mean, that is my preference. It's like 6 of one, half dozen the other, but it makes more sense to me to wait. But again, I didn't know if there was something pressing you to need to go faster, if the town is confused, you know, when they look at our numbers. Okay.
But it sounds like there's still things that we anticipate are gonna change. Like, for example, you know, just getting some more money in food services, right? Like there's things that just will have to change again, maybe. Yeah, I agree.
I think there's still a lot of moving parts. This is what it looks like today on March 24th. But there's still a lot of things that are going to change. You know, I'm carrying assumptions for unemployment very high, that you know, once we get closer and I do some of that deeper dive and we get some of those bills, I can soften that to what it's really going to be. I know Mrs. Raymond and I have met to go through our out of district placements, and are accounted for, but there's also some placeholders in there for some potentials, and those start to flush out towards the end of the year as well. So it is still a moving target for a number of items.
It feels like the substitute savings too might change, you know, with everyone back full time. And yeah.
Oh, Mrs. Wright, I'm very conservative. The superintendent will tell you I've budgeted for 15 absences a day for the next 68 days.
Wow. Let's hope that's conservative.
We will be collecting
15 subs if we needed them.
We'll be collecting more tuition on preschool too, right? We're increasing our number.
Right.
It's not going to ever get to where it was this year because we just don't have enough days.
Yeah.
But it's going to improve, which is good. We have our kids are going to come in 5 days a week, right? They were coming.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, that's absolutely right.
Well, that's good.
And Mrs. Seibert, this is John. I guess when I read your report, I guess my lean was to wait as well. And I was thinking like Karen, unless there was some compelling reason that, you know, you wanted to bring out to the committee for that. And yeah, so, and I just want to ask you about the FEMA reimbursement. I mean, if we end up, would we know about that before the end of the fiscal year? Would that impact any?
We should, yes, we should. The call that both the town accountant and I were on was back the end of February. It was with MMA, and that was where they really started talking about some of the details. And the town accountant really manages that relationship with MEMA and FEMA. So she's been keeping me informed. So.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no other questions, the next item on the agenda are updates. And since Amy's not here, I don't know, Pam, do you want to talk about the tri-chair meeting, or like, I don't even know, did you even have one last week?
We did have one, but I really think that's the chair's responsibility to do so, to update that. We did have one, yep.
All right, so we're just gonna skip that whole item number 5 and go right on to subcommittee reports. Last meeting, we talked about the international students and having, we did a first read. I was gonna just share that.
Martha Raymond, I'm going to ask you to speak on this because I know that I was looping Amy back in. It was, my response to Mrs. O'Connor was it wasn't anything we hadn't talked about before, but you have the specifics, you know, in terms of our owning these students. So I think that's important to bring up.
Well, it's just that once a student enrolls, you know, they're our student. And so if they, you know, and I think we should just be cognizant of that. And I think that, you know, that's fine. But we own, you know, that student is ours. And if they ever need type of, you know, a service that we have or would need to evaluate or counseling, whatever it may be, once they are enrolled and considered a Swampscott high school student, we would do that.
But the other piece to this is that, and I think this was brought up at the last meeting about this policy, is a 1-year commitment. And if it were a 1-year commitment, you know, they would be our student for 1 year. That would
Yes.
provide some safeguards to this process. But what Mrs. Raymond just spoke about was something we touched upon the last time, is that, you know, the district could incur costs depending on
Yes.
circumstances.
Yes, for sure. That would be on it, you know, maybe on unknown costs, right? We wouldn't know, you know, 'cause you can't ever predict what's going to happen.
Do you guys, do you know from other districts? I mean, plenty of schools have exchange students. I mean, people do this all the time. I mean, I know when you speak to like the programs that are accredited programs that we're talking about using, I mean, I know those people vet their students and they tell you, you know, that they're, I mean, to your point last 2 weeks ago, when you said you never know what happens after a person gets here, right? But how do other districts do it? I mean, people do this.
Where are
you? Like,
I don't know the answer to that.
Wait. Base.
I think you guys, someone needs to mute.
Yeah.
There's a lot of background noise. So, I mean, I think that, do you think there's a way to write into the policy? I mean, you think it doesn't even matter if we write into something saying, you know, district will only pay our typical per pupil expense and the sending family will be responsible for additional costs, or?
That would not be my recommendation, that we would write something that would deny civil, you know, rights that we, you know, that we give to students who are registered students. Like for instance, when we do referrals for special education or any type of counseling, we don't look back and see how they registered, right? I don't, you know, that's not something I would go back and review. They're our student when they walk in the door. They're going to fill out registration documents, health documents. They'll be our student. I think the mitigating issue would be that they're here for a year, right? That's the commitment. They wouldn't be enrolling in 9th grade and staying for 4 years, I would assume, right? You know, that's not the kind of programs that I've seen, really. They come for a year or less. I do think it's a good program. I just, you know, it's just good for everyone to know all the different issues that can arise from something like that. I don't know if Martha Seibert had other information. I don't, that's the only information I did speak to our special education attorney just to review what services would that student be entitled to, and they'd be entitled to the services that we provide to our students. They'd be our student.
I mean, I personally feel like the benefits outweigh the risks, you know, to our district and our students and our staff and everyone to have this multicultural opportunity. I think is a benefit, and I think that we have to sort of trust the agencies that vet the students that are coming here, you know. And I just think I think it's worth the risk.
Yeah, and we're not saying it's not. We just felt that the committee needed to understand all aspects of this.
Does anyone else, like Karen or John, you guys have an opinion?
Well, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Suzanne. I mean, it does seem like we're not talking about having like hordes of kids every year, right? You maybe have one a year or one now and then, and it doesn't seem. I mean, it seems like it should be something that we can cover with a contract when they come, similar to, you know, when the kids from Nahat come in, right? If there are services that they need above and beyond, they pay for that. So I mean, it seems like it should be something that we should be able to do, or that other districts are doing successfully.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that the district handle the sort of the internal regulations that we're going to do, and limiting like the number of students per year. Let's say if we limit it to, you know, a half dozen or less, or 3, or whatever we want to limit it to, that also sort of minimizes our risk, because even if all 3 need special ed services, right? Like, I mean, we're just not going to have 10, or I think those internal procedures or protocols are going to be really important to just make sure they're clear. Anyway, so we read the draft policy last time, so we just need to vote to accept this policy and go forward with trying to have a program where international students get to access our education.
Mr. Giantis's hand is up.
Oh, sorry. Just thanks.
Thank you. I was going to ask the question on limiting the number of students, so thank you for bringing that up, Suzanne. I think that's a good risk mitigant. And another question I had was just, I don't know anything about these placement agencies, and I didn't know if there was a mechanism where you know, we could reevaluate them, or the district would reevaluate them, you know, after a year. I mean, if we were unhappy with them for whatever reason, I mean, is there a way to do this, or are we kind of locked in for some period of time with a particular set of placement agencies?
I think that that's a great idea, and I think that's something that is an internal policy, right? Is like one of the things you say is that, you know, agencies. So in our policy right now, John, we say that the only agencies we accept are ones that have been vetted by the U.S. Department of State, right? But we could be more critical too. We could say, you know, the agencies will be evaluated year after year, or, you know, at the end of every year, because if we have a bad experience, we should be able to say we're not going to use, you know, such and such agency anymore, and we still have the other list. So I think that would be a great thing to include, maybe not in the policy, but in the procedures, like how the district evaluates students or requires the requirements. Like, does that make sense?
Yep.
Superintendent? Like,
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, Martha Seibert?
Yeah, I just have a question about the relationship between the district and the agency. So I understand from reading the policy, or at least I think my understanding is, there's no monetary exchange between the district and the agency, but the agency is making money on their end by helping place the student. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm following the procurement law, and that I'm being mindful that it's a revenue generator for somebody. So the district picking somebody is a revenue generator for them. So I'm just trying to think of how we determine what agency we're working with, and if there's a procurement law that I need to think about. That's all.
I don't even understand that. Like there's no money changes hand. Like, I mean, the student pays the agency, right, for the administrative work to find them a district and vet all their credentials, right?
Yes.
But then on our end, we don't pay anyone, or we don't get paid to have a person. So
Right.
what's being procured?
The opportunity, I guess maybe nothing. Maybe I'm overthinking this. I'm just thinking that it's a revenue source that we are now providing a vendor by doing business with them. But I guess I'm overthinking it.
Yeah, I kind of, yeah, I think maybe you are, which is good. So does anyone want to make a motion to accept this policy?
I mean, are we absolutely sure that all the protections are in it that we need, or are we sure that the district can they can put the protections in the protocols? Are we sure that, I just want to make sure that they can do that.
Should we have, is this something that we have council read over? Like,
The more we're talking and uncertain about this, the uncertain tone of the conversation, I would feel better just having council review it.
all right,
Too, I want to do it. I just feel like, yeah, I would like an opinion.
I don't think there's anything wrong with having our legal counsel look at this. I mean, it's based off of MASC policies, so I think, you know, I think we are okay, but there could be things we're not thinking about that it might be helpful to have another set of legal eyes on.
I can have Mrs. Karen send it in the morning.
Yeah, that would be great, and then we'll just put it on the agenda for a vote next time.
That sounds great.
I think that's
It
fine.
makes me feel a little bit more settled.
Yeah, like but with a couple of our questions too, like, are we protected from this, you know what I mean? So that he can specifically read it in that way.
Can you have her, when she takes this draft, can you have her take out the protocols or for the district to like, that's just still on this draft, the stuff that I just
You were
randomly
brainstorming
put there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then maybe someone could think about those a little bit too, just to maybe outline some things we want to consider putting in there. Like while we're
Yeah,
thinking about it.
I'll have her remove those before it's sent.
Yeah, I just think it's something that you know, Mr. Kohat and whoever else will be responsible for these students should think about our rules. Just to have like this, yeah. Anyway, okay, so that's great. We'll just take care of that next time. Easy enough. And the next thing is school building committee update, and I guess that's me. And things are just moving along. We have the design team has been doing some different surveys and some site work to give data to the cost estimators so that we have numbers coming back to talk about what different things in the building are going to cost and what the total cost is going to be. So right now the design team is synthesizing some of that data, and we'll be talking about it in an upcoming meeting. And we hope to be discussing what kind of construction, I don't even know what it's called. Martha Cyber, what's it called if you used design, bid, build, or CM at risk, construction management at risk? Yeah, so, well, so what's that called? Like a construction management?
So construction management at risk is when you involve the construction and contractor earlier in the process and they assume the risk. And I'm oversimplifying this, and our OPM will go through this in great detail at the school building.
But that's the next thing, is sort of decide what kind of model we're going to use for the building committee. That's what I was trying to say.
What kind of procurement model we're going to use? Exactly.
Yes. So I was trying to think of the word model. Anyway, that's the next big thing on our agenda to figure out, and then hopefully some people who are interested in working on a ballot committee for the school will start meeting and work on that as well. So that's it. And now we have the consent agenda. Let me just pull it up so I can read it. The consent agenda is designed to expedite the handling of routine and miscellaneous business of the district. The school committee may adopt the entire consent agenda with one motion. At the request of any committee member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda for discussion. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Super. Any questions about the agenda? I mean, yeah, so on the consent agenda are the regular session minutes from March 10th and then warrant 21-37. I had a question on the warrant, Martha, just out of curiosity. There's an item for some repair and inspection of the lift at Clark. Is that just not under warranty anymore? Is it really, has it really been that long ago?
I would imagine that I'd have to go back and look at the bill specifically, but I would imagine that that's probably an annual inspection that has to happen. Same with our elevators and other things.
Yeah, I just didn't know if there was repair associated with that too or something. I was just surprised to see anything about that lift because it feels like we just did it, but I know it's getting to be a few years now. Anyway, motion, anyone else, anything on the agenda? I mean, on the consent agenda? All right, I need a motion to, what do we do? A motion to accept the consent agenda? One of you guys?
Make the motion.
I'll second.
Super. If you were, so we'll do a roll call. Karen,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and I am a yes myself. And so now we will move on to public comment. And I'm not sure, I see a few participants that are at this meeting still, and I'm not sure if anyone wishes to speak. If you do, feel free to raise your hand and I will call on you and unmute you and all that kind of stuff. Just keep in mind, public comment is 3 minutes or less, and we will try to listen and take in what you have to say, but we'll not be responding to it tonight. I don't see anyone for public comment. Wow. Guys, this is great. 8:08. Motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
And a
I'll
second.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor, Karen,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and myself is a yes. So that's it. Meeting is over.
Good evening, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks.
No.
Bye.
Yeah.
Zane, just give me a minute to end the stream.
Don't pick it up.
Okay. I'm gonna stop recording it.